Great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Climate Reality Project BC launch event for the National Climate League. My name is Jessica McIlroy, and I am the Community Climate Hub Regional Organizer for the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island region. And my co-host this evening is Laura Sachs, Regional Organizer for the BC Interior. We have guests joining us from different parts of BC and Canada this evening. I am joining from the unsurrendered lands of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people, and I invite you all to take just a moment to recognize on your own the lands on which you reside. We are very pleased this evening to have Pamela and Grouse Barnes joining us to ground us in place and to help set our intentions before we begin with our presentations. Pamela and Grouse Barnes are Indigenous educators and knowledge keepers from West Bank First Nation. They are highly dedicated to preserving the Syilx language, knowledge, and culture. Both are currently adjunct professors in the Faculty of Health and Social Development with UBC School of Nursing, where they facilitate cultural sensitivity training. They both also facilitate Syilx teachings for the people in public in partnership with the Kelowna Heritage Museum, Kelowna Art Gallery, Rotary Center for the Arts, and regional parks. And we'll give our space to Pamela and Grouse.
Thank you. So my name is Pamela Barnes. My ancestral name is Chuchuwasket, which means the coming of a storm or the coming of change. And it's my honor tonight to virtually in these new times, welcome you to the traditional unceded territory of the Syilx people. And in doing that, I want to share with you a little bit of understanding about what that really means and what those our lands mean to us. Here in this part of Turtle Island, which is how we refer to North America, the sharing of our lands with others is about 200 years, where other parts of North America or Turtle Island, that history goes back 500 or 1,000 years, depending on where. But it's fairly new, 200 years in this particular region. With the newcomers came ideas about human relationship to land that's very different than how we have practiced living on these lands for thousands and thousands of years. And one of those ideas is about the concept of human ownership of land. We don't see ourselves as owning the land in that Western view. We see ourselves as borrowing the lands from our great, 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 great grandchildren. And just to explain a little bit better the difference between those two ideas, if I own this necklace, I can sell it, trade it, give it away. It's mine. I can do what I want. If there's an expectation that I can take really good care of it, or I can toss it aside. Again, it's mine. I can do what I want with it. If I borrow this, everything changes. I can't sell it. I can't trade it. I can't give it away. It's not mine to do that with. There's an expectation that I take the very best care that I possibly can, and that when I leave it or return it, it's at least in the same condition I found it, and if at all possible, better. It's with this understanding of our relationship and responsibilities to these lands that we first welcomed people to this unceded territory of the Syilx people. And it's with that understanding that tonight I welcome you to the traditional, currently occupied territory of the Syilx people, with the gentle reminder that none of us, including ourselves as Syilx people, are doing the best job that we can to take care of this land for all of our children, for all of our grandchildren, for all of our great-grandchildren, and so on and so forth. So, Finland.
Wij gasten lach, is kwist, keninam tumtaan hoitstens, kentil staat vernieuwd, kikken moet. Ja, het stem, het stem, ik ga koks ulu saapul koks kwakwaal mika, ikel tempula, ikel sinka hilstet, tali gastis puus, ikel min, ik het kaap stem, ik het sinka hilstet. Why apana skalkal, apana why skeptum, kikamiko, takotikal tempula, koks ichkana, koks tikwa, de rimsten, de stichten, de zaakhoit. Ja, het stemmet skulstem, putti, was de putti koala, talikastis is puusku ulus, uska chak lutswitks kanums, lutswitks tak utak, emlem kun chutenganois. I want to thank the Creator for allowing me to say a few words of that little prayer. My English name is Wilfred Barnes. My ancestral name is Keninam Tumtam Quaitston, and my nickname is Grouse. So I got a whole bunch of names. The things that we are going to talk about is so important to each and every one of us. When I pray that water still be clear 7 generations from now. The trees still be here. The animals still be here. For our great grandchildren to enjoy. So we will get on with what we're going to do this evening, and I wish each and every one of you a good day, a good evening. Let's enjoy each other's company, and let's get on with what we're going to do. Lim Lim. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Grouse, for taking the time to be with us this evening. So now we'll move into our presentations, but I'll just mention that if you have a question at any point for any of our speakers, please use the Q&A option. We will monitor it for questions, but also feel free to use the chat to connect with each other, be respectful in your comments and inquiries, and use that chat function where it serves you. So we're here this evening to take a closer look at the National Climate League and look at it in a BC context. So the discussion on an equitable plan to address climate change and decarbonize our communities is far bigger than what we could possibly go over in the next hour. So what we've chosen to focus on is the decarbonization of buildings, how data can be leveraged to make effective policy decisions, the role of community members and the role of local governments, all while trying to maintain a lens on affordable and accessible housing. So still no small task. We're first going to have Matthew Chapman, who's the Community Climate Hub Manager with the Climate Reality Project, give us an overview of the National Climate League. Matthew.
Thank you very much, Jessica, and thank you very much, Grouse and Pamela, for situating us and reminding us of the lands we're on. I'm gratefully hosted here in what is commonly known as Montreal by the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations, and really learning a lot, especially in the last couple of years from those nations. So I'm really grateful for their wisdom and the different ways of knowing and learning and living. So the National Climate League is trying to make things fun when it comes to tracking progress towards decarbonizing our cities and making it a bit of friendly competition. And it is the product of 3 years, almost 4 years now, of reflection. And it came out of the Climate Reality project. Climate Reality brings people together from all over the world. There are now something like 35,000 people who've taken a training with Al Gore and have gone back from those trainings into their communities and have spoken truth to power. So in their religious circles, in their community circles, in their professional circles, in their political circles. And part of what we do at the Canadian branch of Climate Reality is equip communities to say, what is it that we need to be doing to take care of this land and this water and this air for the next 7 generations and beyond. So we've started benchmarking municipal progress on issues at the confluence of climate and quality of life. How do you get people excited about taking climate action? Well, improve their lives at the same time. And so taking a closer look at the results of the National Climate League in this past year, we see that North Vancouver had some strong points, little green circle around the green buildings logo. So they had the highest, or one of the highest, green buildings per capita in the country, owing in part to municipal policy encouraging and a step code encouraging the building of high efficiency buildings that need very little energy to heat and cool. Victoria, also a very strong contender in the green building sector, and Vancouver really taking a whole lot of those laurels, those wreaths. So leading the country in sustainable jobs, so number of people employed in sustainable manner, the most walkable city in the country, the most shared vehicles per capita, reducing the amount of waste and energy inefficiency in privately owned vehicles, intrinsic in owning your own vehicle and having it parked 95% of the time. Also led on canopy cover and green buildings as well. And where we saw a clear weakness across the province was affordability. So while there is a transition towards green buildings, there's a certain gentrification or a certain cost that comes with that. And that's why we chose to focus on green buildings and affordable housing on this BC launch webinar. In Kelowna, we had bicycle lanes being one of the stronger points and green buildings being one of the weaker points. And I'm going to have to back up here to see Nelson. I apologize for that. And I'm going to refer to mine because I can't read it that closely. But Nelson has a strong, one of the best, one of its strong points being shared vehicles, and one of its weaker points being bicycle lanes. There's a whole bunch more data behind the data that you see here in the National Climate League's stat tracker. So there's a good deal more wealth of information there, and I will show you the link to that in just a moment. But first, just to show you kind of where we've come from, you're most welcome to compare this year's standings to the previous year's standings, and the links are there at the bottom: ncl18.climatehub.ca, ncl19, and ncl20 to download each of the previous, this year and the last 2 previous years' editions. The purpose when we came at this, now almost 4 years ago, it was to provide a tangible outworking of this comic. How do you sell the transition, even if people aren't on board with the climate stuff? How do you make sure that the co-benefits are front and center so that people say, oh, you know what, this is kind of maybe not a terrible idea after all. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons why Climate Reality for the last 5 years now has been focused on municipalities, focused on supporting bottom-up initiatives to decarbonize local cities in a just and equitable manner. I won't read through all of these. The recording will be available, bc.nc.ca ncl-lnc.ca. So the same link that you registered for this webinar will be the recording link, probably active as of tomorrow. And it is the right time to stand up in your community and take leadership on climate. It has for too long been the role of elected officials or professionals, people who are trained in the field. We need to see civil society, we need to see citizens standing up and supporting, pushing, cajoling, pressuring sometimes their municipalities to move forward. And the evidence from the IPCC Cities Conference in Edmonton bears that out. It was clear that we need to be engaging citizens more deeply, and some cities do that much better than others. I'll note. We won't get into all the nitty gritty, but here are the indicators that were chosen. They are linked to sustainable development goals. They're by no means the be all and end all. They are a starting point, and there are certain constraints that as a national initiative we've had to abide by that are maybe locally you might choose to adapt these such that they're more relevant to your reality. We chose these based on political relevance. Are there people who already care about these things and are already mobilized around these issues? The accessibility of the data. So while we could have requested really difficult to obtain data, that would have been perfect and would have been a very good proxy for change on the ground. A lot of that data is very hard to come by or expensive, requires consultants and reports and stuff. So that was a very important criteria to allow cities of all sizes to participate without having a huge budget to allocate to the collection of this data. The potential for greenhouse gas emission mitigation, of course, was one of the main criteria. Does the municipality have jurisdiction to act on this specifically? And is it an indicator that is comparable across municipalities? So that's how we came about landing on this. And it is the engagement is one of the differentiating factors of this initiative, in the sense that typically when we're benchmarking cities, there are only a few stakeholders involved. There's a consultant who's writing the report. There's the city staff who might be providing the data, and it ends just about there. And we believe at Climate Reality that it cannot end there. It needs to go to every facet and corner of the community. People need to be talking about, hey, we could be doing better here. Why aren't we doing better? What could we be learning from our neighbors? What could we be learning from cities across the country or across the world? So that's why there's an annual flow, similar to the annual ritual of watching the NHL draft players at a certain time of the year and go into, you know, the playoffs, pardon me, another time of the year, and have a little bit of downtime, you know, in the summer and off-season training. So in the same way, we've got this kind of annual rhythm set up. And again, I won't go through all the details, but at this stage right now, we're in the validation process of the indicators. And that means speaking to researchers and improving on what we've done in the past year. And we're asking you to get involved in 3 ways. So the information shared on tonight's webinar is a piece of the puzzle, but it only becomes real. It only becomes impactful when we go beyond the convinced choir that we have here, people who are willing to take an hour out of their evening, listen to some excellent speakers and engage with these ideas, grapple with the challenges in order to improve policy and outcomes. You need to move into your, or address your city hall with data, visualize that data, speak to the media. And we have tools at Climate Reality through the Climate Hub initiative to support you in doing so. So these are the key kind of takeaways. As I mentioned earlier, the stat tracker is available for you to peruse, to compare your city to other cities. The document itself, the standings, is a starting point, but certainly there's a whole bunch of other comparisons that could be drawn. And you can filter this data, you know, by indicator, province, or reporting year, also by small, medium, and large cities. and by other fields as well. You can sort it by all sorts of ways. And I just want to mention that for any of your cities who have submitted data, you can use this formula, vancouver.data.climatehub.ca, and it will show you all of the data for your city: Victoria data, Kelowna data, Nelson data. We have a slew of BC cities who've submitted a good amount of data. And if you'd like to discover what your city has submitted, then you'll use this link, city.data.climatehub.ca. If you'd like to see all of the data and compare your city to other cities, then you would use the stat tracker link and be able to see all of that data all at once, and then taking those numbers into City Hall. I'm going to really briefly go over these because I think my time is up, but there are numbers there in the data sets about, of course, GHG emissions per capita, which are a little bit less easy to sell to the average population. And then I really wanted to mention the fact that sustainable buildings are a big part of that. Connected again to the SDGs and seeing Vancouver leading the pack this year, with Victoria not too far behind Burnaby and a few of the other BC municipalities leading the way. And affordable housing on the other end of the spectrum, Vancouver and a number of the lower mainland especially, but also in the interior, being some of the least affordable cities. So that's why I'm super, super excited about the lineup that we have of speakers tonight. And I'll jump through some of these and leave it there and pass it back off to Jessica. Thank you all for being here. And I hope that tonight is a starting point and that this data helps your advocacy efforts moving forward.
Great, thank you so much, Matthew. So as mentioned, the presentations this evening in tonight's webinar is being recorded and will be posted. Matthew is also an excellent resource of links off the top of his head. So if you have any questions on where to find something, please do put them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'm sure Matthew will get back to you very quickly. So I'd like to invite our first presenter in, Trish Dehnel, who currently serves on the board of the Planning Institute of BC, but she has an extensive working experience with local governments in the Kootenay specifically on developing inventories and managing building energy consumption. We'll hand it over to Trish.
Good evening, everybody. Let's share my screen here. Oh dear. Okay. Okay. I think I'm ready. So good evening, everyone. I come to you from Nelson, the traditional territories of the Kootenay Nation, the Sulux and the Snaiks people. It's my pleasure to be here. And this evening, my presentation will discuss my experience as program manager for a number of Kootenay-based home retrofit programs. The definition of planning is shown there. I'm part of the Planning Institute of British Columbia, and really a planner considers the past, present, and future generation in the development of plans, policy, and programs. My personal focus for the past 13 years has been community energy planning, where I link land use planning to energy conservation, emission reduction, inclusive, age-friendly, and healthy communities. The climate action, so as background here, in 2007, the province introduced the Climate Action Charter. It's a voluntary agreement to address emissions in 3 places. Corporate, that's leading by example, showing leadership and working to be carbon neutral in your corporate operations. Community, that's to add greenhouse gas reduction targets to your planning documents and develop plans to achieve those targets. And complete, build compact communities, reduce sprawl, concentrate infrastructure concentrate infrastructure and resources. Clean BC is the pathway to achieve the province's legislated greenhouse gas emissions, the targets. And there we go. We can't manage what we don't measure. To clarify, the retrofit programs are considered community actions in the slide showing the community versus the corporate actions. Local government implements policy to reduce emissions through 3 key impact areas: building, transportation, and waste. My work has been to facilitate community energy plans that focus on the community and promote compact development, carbon neutral operations, and energy efficient building. So I'm having trouble turning these pages. There we go. I'd like to draw your attention to the Community Energy Association website. It's got a climate action planner, which offers it a do-it-yourself application to determine energy consumption in your community and actions needed to reduce emissions. Another website that identifies the big moves and outlines solutions to move your community to a low carbon future is this bcclimateleaders.ca and the Climate Leader Playbook. It discusses those 3 policy categories in the 6 big moves. The retrofit campaigns are found in the decarbonizing existing building category. Community energy plans are the development of partnerships. They're great community events. And when we're doing community energy planning, we look at this pyramid, which shows the 4 R's of community energy planning. We always start at the bottom, which is behavior, reducing energy demand. So you insulate those buildings and you reduce your need for heating and cooling them if your building is well built and insulated. Then you move up that pyramid, reuse waste heat, some ideas, look at renewable heat, and then the top of the pyramid is renewable electricity. Now, to get into those campaigns and the retrofit that I was talking about, or that I've been involved in, the groundbreaker was actually one I wasn't involved in, but that was the Rossland Energy Diet in 2011. Rossland is a compact community. It has a winter climate, older housing stock, and had high electricity bills. It ended up being an award-winning campaign, and there I am at the bottom in the picture presenting the mayor at the time their 2012 Climate and Energy Action Award. They found 22% of the homeowners registered for energy assessments. All 35 of the businesses received complete lighting retrofits. $1.6 million in that community was spent on energy efficient improvements. They had some good reducing of annual consumption of natural gas and electricity, and their greenhouse gas emissions were reduced by 338 tons. The next campaign that followed that I was involved in was the Kootenay Energy Diet of 2013. It followed the success and approach of the Rossland Energy Diet. It was a 7-month campaign for Fortis BC customers in the 14 member municipalities in the electoral areas in the regional district of Central Kootenay and Kootenay boundary. We had great community support from all the municipalities, the contractors, the community groups like Rotary and seniors groups. Again, we used a very personalized approach. We coined the term intervention, which were the community trade fairs that we had local building supplies, the HVAC, the contractors, insulation lighters, local groups. We also partnered with the local credit unions to offer low interest loan programs. Our findings for the Kootenay Energy Diet was it was a large geographical area, and that was challenging. You need to spend time nurturing the contractors so they understand the program to provide the energy retrofits and upgrades. people do need a longer time frame to access the rebates. The community blitz of Roslyn Energy Diet created a more compact program, which facilitates neighbors' word of mouth participation. But the success, we did have 862 participants in the program, which was about 4.5% of the housing stock that qualified. And at the time, it was the areas that had these retrofit programs in place that were actually achieving and having energy audits done. I got to really move quickly here. The next slide is the Nelson ecosave program, which began in 2012 when their initial campaign was launched. It's ongoing and continues to refresh with updated and related programs. It has a very personalized touch and has a dedicated Nelson Hydro Community Energy Program Manager, who I believe is on this call. Hello there. And just a great program with a personalized touch. And the final program that I was involved in was the REAP, Regional Energy Efficiency Program through the RDCK, which was a 2-year campaign for both existing and new homes. It offered the regional approach for all people in the RDCK, regardless of energy provider. And there are 4 of them in our area, which is BC Hydro, Nelson Hydro, Fortis BC, gas and electric, and then even off-grid people. So Nelson ecosave managed the home renovation stream, and I managed the new buildings, which it was encouraging people to use the BC Energy Step Code, which at this time is still voluntary, but we have an aim in BC to have all new homes built in BC by 2032 to be net zero ready. Just move quickly again. Just to point out that the BC Housing is working on projects to improve reserve housing in the East Kootenay, and 20 homes in the Ecological First Nations have received energy upgrades to receive BC Energy Step Code 3 standard or better. With respect to the retrofit programs, we incorporate as many community-based social marketing tools as possible using the theories of scarcity and reciprocity. And some of the lessons learned, again, the Community Energy Association, it's old, but they did a report in 2014 on some of the analysis reports on those campaigns. There were 11 at the time, and some really good feedback in that document. Some of the things that we learned was, make sure your contractors are engaged, having the local government and incentives, the personalized coaching, as is done with the Nelson ecosave program. Branding is important. We moved from the scale to the light bulb and the money sign because people didn't understand that energy diets was not a weight loss program, but it was actually a GHG reduction program and money saving. I won't go into this, but when you are designing a campaign, just these are some of the things to consider: the size, the budget, the area, and financing, and how you're going to offer energy assessments. To summarize, or to finish off, the Better Homes BC, that's the website to check out now for all the current rebates, incentives, and programs for new and existing home. I invite you all to call the energy coach at that number for personalized information on your own home. And that's, sorry, very quick, but to just sum up, the retrofit programs encourage healthy and more comfortable housing. We are saving money in our energy consumption, and we are reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Energy awareness is being built, and we're serious about building better. And I'm happy to answer questions probably at the end of this. And over to the next person. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Trish. Really great sort of just example and information on how we really need all partners involved from all sides of the equation when it comes to looking at our homes. And maybe we can trick some people into participating if they think it's a weight loss program instead and get more people involved. All right, our next speaker is Betsy Agar, who's a, sorry, I was gonna say serious analyst. You are a serious analyst, but you're a senior analyst in the Buildings and Urban Solutions program with the Pembina Institute, where she designs policy and programs for retrofit of BC's residential building stock. And Betsy also has extensive personal experience in retrofitting her home. Over to you.
Thanks, Jess and Trish and everyone else for getting us started today. I'm going to assume you can see my slides properly because it worked before, and unless somebody objects, I'll keep moving forward. Thanks for having me tonight. It's really always a pleasure to be able to share out what we're doing, and certainly to see how many people are interested in this and others who are active in this space. I really appreciate that. I and happen to be in that North Vancouver region, the Coast Salish people's lands. I think I'm probably not one of the ones that counted towards that. I think it was the city of North Vancouver, if I know anything, not where I live in the district of North Vancouver. So congratulations to the city of North Vancouver on their progress. We're working on it. So the Pembina Institute, if you don't know us, is a national nonprofit clean energy think tank with offices across Canada. We work in several areas, including renewable energy, oil and gas policy, climate policy, and energy efficiency, including buildings, which is, of course, what I'm discussing tonight. But today, I really want to raise the alarm about the impacts that climate change will, and in many places is already having on our buildings. Flooding, fires, extreme temperatures, and poor air quality are front and center in our news cycles, right along with the impacts on our buildings, costs of recovery, and rising insurance premiums, and in some cases, lives lost. The FCM, or the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, estimates that Canadian municipalities need to invest a collective $5.3 billion in climate adaptation just for the public infrastructure, and that's every year for the next 50 years. So, but what about our buildings, where we spend upwards of 90% of our lives? Our buildings can emit, nearly 60% of some cities' annual emissions. And we think that 2/3 up to 3/4 of the ones that are already standing will still be in operation by 2050. The retrofits that achieve deep carbon reductions have to be part of decarbonizing our communities in our collective fight against climate change. And 30 years is not a long time. We really need meaningful solutions to drive down building emissions, and we need them fast, and we need them at market scale. But wait, there are more issues. Remember when I mentioned that we spend 90% of our time indoors? Well, that means that the condition of our buildings and our indoor living spaces can actually impact our health. So indoor air quality can have higher levels of pollution than actually outdoor quality. And that can lead to sick building syndrome, respiratory diseases, and aggravate allergies. It can actually help transmit infectious diseases, which we're all very aware of right now with COVID-19. And this can be particularly risky for the health of vulnerable populations, such as the elderly, young children, and people living with chronic illness. And besides all of that, there are very real costs associated with carrying on business as usual. At the simplest level, as buyers learn and grasp more about the risks of climate change, properties that are not ready for increasing intensity and frequency of extreme weather events won't be valued as high as others. And recovering from extreme weather events can really be expensive, but the old adage holds, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And FCM estimates that every dollar invested in climate change adaptation, so getting ready for those climate changes in our infrastructure, will save $3 to $6 not spent on recovery costs. So big savings in preventing the problems in the first place. So in fact, climate change has been cited as one of the biggest reasons for insurance rate increases, which have been anywhere between 5 to 10%. That's what they were recorded in 2019. At the same time, premiums and deductibles for sewer backups and overland flood insurance has also increased. And insurers are warning that climate change may make insurance coverage unaffordable for people. They're calling for risk disclosure requirements. So for people to be reporting how their buildings will be performing as the climate changes. And if you add to that the utility costs that are rising faster than the consumer price index of 1.7%, and in some cases, our energy costs are rising as high as 6% per year. And finally, if we recognize that the federal carbon price is now constitutional and that's scheduled to grow to $170 by 2030. So all these things all combined means there should be lineups for deep retrofits that are about as long as that coveted ounce of prevention against COVID-19 are right now. So if I want to zoom out and I want to have a look at BC's entire building sector, it's not quite a zooming out. I've realized I've just shuffled my slides, but just taking BC for an example, we estimate that to meet our emissions reductions targets, BC is going to have to retrofit or electrify or fuel switch 30,000 homes, 17,000 apartment units, and 3 million meters square commercial space every year from now until 2050. So if you compare that with historic retrofit programs like Live Smart BC was our most recent one. I think it ended in 2010 or 11. This would be triple the pace and double the depth of those efforts to reduce GHGs from existing buildings. So we really do need to roll out deep retrofits at an unprecedented pace and scale. And this is going to require a full paradigm shift, which is really why we were inspired by Energy Sprong, which literally means energy leap in Dutch. The Netherlands is revolutionizing the retrofit process. They're applying modern production methods to an industry that really is as old as civilization. You might think about it as the smartphone of retrofits, one solution addressing multiple needs, and then leaving it with this sleek new fancy look. Their solutions have evolved into prefabricated exterior wall and roof panels, hence this little animation that they run on their website. High efficiency and low carbon mechanical systems, system controls and performance monitoring, as well as on-site renewable electricity. But getting to these, high-tech prefabricated solutions took several iterations. But half a dozen years later, they're being produced off-site and rolled out out of fully automated manufacturing plants. So early iterations, maybe if this was on a big screen, you'd be able to see up there. They could be installed within about 2 weeks. So offsite construction already at that point was really resulting in considerably less disruption to residents. Initially, the deep retrofit measures cost about 130,000 euros per unit. But in those 6 years and many iterations later, they've dropped the time spent on site to a day. They've cut the cost of these things in half. And since then, they've actually added solar, which you can see at the on top of the bottom right building, and are reaching net zero with these retrofits. One of the most recent developments is what they call the Magic Box. This is a single unit that houses all the HVAC equipment, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning equipment, and along with the solar inverter, monitoring and controls, and it all comes into this little package that they install in the exterior retrofit. But they're still aiming for better. Over 14,000 net zero retrofits of housing units are currently planned, and over 3,000 have already been completed in the Netherlands. And what they're interested in is actually seeing this syndicated around the world, which we're also pleased to say is actually happening here in Canada. We're really grateful to be part of and be able to contribute to this growing group of deep retrofit incubators. It's really feels like it's becoming a movement. So I'll start, bottom to top. You have the East Coast Ecology Action Center and Recover, both coming out of Nova Scotia. CanMet Energy, which is out of Natural Resources Canada, they're developing prefabricated panels and testing them with Ottawa Community Housing. Sustainable Buildings Canada has an Energy Sprong program. Retrofit Canada is building prefabricated panels, has already done 2 of 7 buildings at the Sundance Co-op complex, and has a new contract for 3 single-family dwellings. Which brings me to Reframed. Through Reframed, we're working to foster innovative tech solutions like Energy Sprong did, but we're really interested in that market transformation, the transformation of that ecosystem of forces that will make deep retrofits the standard for our existing buildings to meet. And so where each of Canada's deep retrofit incubators is adapting Energy Sprong in a unique way, some are more focused on the innovative technologies like the Pure project out of CanMet, whereas others are more interested in developing the industry capacity, which Sustainable Buildings Canada is doing. We're trying to do everything, but from a market transformation perspective. And this is kind of how we, or many people actually envision it, that we're pushing from the outside, trying to make demand and supply come to the middle where everybody feels like they're winning, and then making sure that the finance and regulatory contexts make that possible so that that business model makes sense for everybody. And right now we're way out at the edges of this. And so the work that we're trying to do is to understand how we, or what that gap is, how we get into that business model, what those deep retrofits can look like, and then how we can get there. So we're really trying to innovate in multiple fronts, not the least of which is how we buy these things, how we procure them, how we design them, how we deliver them, as well as how we're paying for them through creative business models. And so Reframed is actually a partnership between Pembina Institute, who I'm representing tonight, as well as the BC Nonprofit Housing Association, Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation, and the City of Vancouver. And then where we're working on demonstration projects, we're also partnered with BC Housing for the Reframed Lab. So I probably need to take a step back and clarify what we mean by deep retrofits. You may know the term deep energy retrofits. Our feeling is that that term is actually too limiting. Typically, that focused on energy efficiency, we think misses opportunities. We're thinking about this really in the moment of lives of many of our buildings as once in a lifetime opportunity to take preventative measures against that collection of threats that I mentioned earlier. So now is really the time to make our homes energy efficient and more comfortable to live in, to pollute less carbon, and to help make sure that they help fight the changing climate. We want them to be healthier and safer by filtering out pathogens and pollution. We want them to be resilient to shocks like floods and, in the case of earthquake zones, to seismic events. And we want them ready for more increasing extreme weather that can cause overheating, especially that's particularly a worry for vulnerable populations, as I mentioned. And then eventually you can see down at the bottom there, this idea of being smart grid integrated, being able to actually, leverage what we have in our houses to help the utilities balance things like load demand. And then that'll also help us keep our utilities bills low. So we really want to think about our buildings. They are our safe havens. We need deep retrofits that really make sure that we can shelter against the impacts of a changing climate and other threats. So like on Energy Sprong, we are starting with the social housing sector for our demonstration projects, mostly because, right now we have, certainly in BC, we have multiple levels of governments that are investing in social housing sector. And we also believe that the people they house have largely been overlooked by the green building trend. So these 6 are the houses or the buildings that we've secured. They are low-rise, we call MURBs, multi-unit residential buildings, mostly wood framed, except for that one at the top right. mostly in the Lower Mainland, which is sort of Metro Vancouver, one on Vancouver Island near Victoria, and one in the interior in Kamloops. And so collectively, these house 189, have about 189 units dedicated to provide social housing and supportive services. They use over 10,000 gigajoules of natural gas a year. They consume over 900 megawatt hours of hydro a year, and their collective annual cost for utilities is 190,000 Canadian dollars. And their annual emissions are 490 tons of equivalent carbon dioxide. So because BC's grid is quite clean, electrification could all but decarbonize their operations if we just switch them over to electric heating. But the spark gap, or the cost difference between natural gas and electricity, really means that we have to do more than just switching, which is where we bring in the deep retrofit piece. I'm not going to go into the details of how the lab is running, but essentially what we're after is to be able to bring 6 design teams working on 6 similar buildings and allowing them this live time collaborative opportunity so that they're not having to read kind of after the fact decisions. They can actually influence each other. And the idea is to allow these leaders in this field to push each other on solutions that we're hoping are replicable and that are, maximizing this big pool of knowledge in the moment of design. And what's key here is that we're really looking for synergies where, you might have a goal to drive down energy use to save utility costs, and you might have a goal to decarbonize the building operations, but can that goal also be married with, say, some seismic or structural upgrades that need to happen, or some air quality improvements that need to happen? And so what we really think is that doing these things kind of piece by piece is a real missed opportunity, and we want to get past that.
Betsy, sorry, if you could conclude, it'll give us time for some questions at the end.
Yes, thanks. For sure. So I'm going to flip through a whole bunch of slides here, and that was my worry tonight. But I want you just to pause on a couple of things. One, there are very real reasons that we need to do this, and not the least of which is the cost savings. And really at the heart of the matter is that we spend upwards of 90% of our time inside, and our spaces need to be healthy and safe. But the industry is really ready with the innovative solutions that we need for you to future-proof your buildings. If you have questions, you're welcome to email me and take a look at pembina.org for more pieces on deep retrofits. I have slides on my own experience with switching to a heat pump, but we'll leave those for questions afterwards. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Betsy. Good reminder, I think, of how much we actually ask of our buildings and the relationship that we need to have with our built environment, given how much time we do spend and how much we look for from our built space, and great details on the possibilities for retrofits there. So our last but definitely not least speaker is Will Hamilton, who serves as a city councillor in Courtenay and a director on the Comox Valley Regional District. Will is quite actively involved with the Climate Caucus and the Help Cities Lead campaign steering committee, as well as PACE BC. Go ahead, Will.
Okay, so here I go with share screen. Let's see how this works. Are you all seeing a glacier? Excellent. Okay. So my name's Will Hamilton. I'm speaking to you today from the unceded traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. I'm a city councillor here in Courtenay, and I'm also a climate reality graduate. And as a climate reality graduate, I know that you can't just do data. You need to share a bit of a story in order to help engage people in what's going on. So I just want to spend a minute or so talking to you about how I came to be standing here and involved with in climate issues. And the story kind of begins with what you're looking at right now. This is the glacier that sits above my city. You can actually see it from the office window where I work. And the Comox people call it Kootenay, the white whale, and it's said to have been here since the beginning of time. And I had kind of an aha moment when I saw this headline, that this glacier, along with every other glacier on Vancouver Island, will be gone in 25 years. And that's a 7-year-old headline. So it's what, 18 years remaining before this glacier becomes a seasonal snowfall accumulation. And as I became more sensitized to climate change, I started seeing its thumbprint in more places. Later that same year, my city, which is divided by a river, suffered the first of 2 1 in 50-year floods. And who'd have thought that would happen 2 years in a row? And that's, as the city council, this danger is something we work very much with. And as I saw climate change impacting around me more and more and more, I decided to sign up for Climate Reality, as all of you did as well. And this is 2017 in Seattle. Laura Sachs will be speaking in a second, is in this picture as well. And for anyone who's playing Where's Waldo, I'm to your left of Al Gore. And one of the things that really struck me from that time was Gore's statement that if you don't like the way things are going politically in your community, to run for office yourself. So in 2018, in the next municipal election, I did, and was elected to council in the fall of 2018. And a piece of good fortune is that another person who was elected that same election, councillor in Nelson, actually, had the idea that it would be good for people, individual councillors who care about climate, to have a way of connecting, a way of sharing strengths, sharing victories, and speaking with a common voice. And that became Climate Caucus. And it's become as I said, a collective brain. It's councillors all over the country. We're all trying to solve roughly the same problems in thousands and thousands of little laboratories of the little communities we live in. If we can share the wins, support each other, and we do some government relations as well, which is where Help Cities Lead comes in. So this is Climate Caucus, about 6 months after it started. It now numbers over 360 elected officials from C to C to C. And that gives us a bit of a voice when we're trying to speak to other levels of government. So let me talk about Help Cities Lead. Help Cities Lead is founded because of the dilemma that we're all talking about this evening. That buildings are responsible for 40 to 60% of community greenhouse gas emissions in BC. How do we do that? How do we grapple with that? And the challenge is that local governments are the creation of provincial governments. We only have the power that they choose to give us. And currently, we don't have much of anything in terms of addressing greenhouse gases ourselves. There are far fewer tools than would be useful. And most of the work that municipal governments do is related really to incentives and information campaigns. So we started thinking about ways in which this situation could be improved. What would help for local governments to have? And the reason we think that more needs to be done is, of course, there are a lot of emissions coming from our buildings. We did some computer modeling and found that if you look at this chart, the black line is the 2007 level. We measure greenhouse gas reductions as going down from 2007. And the blue diamonds are where BC is pledged to get. And actually, since this slide was created, it's an even deeper cut that they're looking for. But a month ago, the sector-specific targets for buildings were released, and they are between 59 and 63% reductions from 2007 by 2030. So that first diamond, the one for 2030, is now significantly further down. And the yellow line shows what would happen with business as usual. And clearly there's a large shortfall in the target. And with the more ambitious targets, a bigger shortfall still. So Help Cities Lead identified 5 different policy tools. One is regulating greenhouse gases for new buildings. And while there is a step code, the step code is neutral as to what kind of fuel source you use. And as a result, a level 5 in the step code house using natural gas emits 4 times as much as a level 1 house using electric heating. So without GHGs being a metric, the step code is of limited use. We're also proposing mandatory home energy labeling, so you can know something about the efficiency of a home before you buy it. I mean, can you imagine buying a car without knowing the mileage you're going to get out of it? It's a foreign concept. Why should we expect any less of our homes? The third is PACE financing, which some of you may know something about. It's a way of borrowing using the value of your home for a prescribed set of retrofits to increase energy efficiency and reduce GHGs, and also for the installation of renewable energy. And one of the things we've been working on with the way in which we've been proposing PACE to the provincial government has been to work to ensure that renters are not going to be left out of the picture. And in fact, we have a member of the Building Owners and Managers Association. Their political representative sits on the PACE BC steering committee, as do I, and is an enthusiastic advocate. Building owners, people who own and then rent buildings out, see a benefit to the PACE model as well. It makes their buildings more valuable. And it's a good model for repayment. Another thing to consider about PACE financing is that it doesn't work for on-reserve Indigenous people, given the different way in which land is being held. It's held under the Indian Act. So when talking to the provincial government, we're certainly trying to make sure that that there's a greater degree of equity in these programs than might otherwise be the case. Step 4 is regulating GHGs for existing buildings. So this would be there's the retrofit code is being updated in British Columbia, and we would like to see GHG requirements in retrofits. You're going to go back and work on your house, if you're going to be doing any kind of renovation work, that there'll be GHG standards for that work. And finally is building energy benchmarking. It helps governments measure levels of emissions. That way they can target policies more specifically and efficiently, and measure where they're actually gaining wins. So encouragingly, since Help Cities Lead, led by Climate Caucus, since it began, 3 of the 5 policy planks we're looking for were adopted by the new NDP government and put into the mandate letters for ministers. So we have reducing GHGs for new buildings, mandatory home energy labeling, and PACE financing are all in the mandate letters and moving ahead. So there are 2 areas where we still want to be advocating to the provincial government for change: GHGs for existing buildings, and Betsy was just talking about the sheer pace with which that has to be done, the sheer number of retrofits that have to occur per year. So setting clear GHG targets. You don't want to be having retrofits occur and not have them hit the targets that they need to. And benchmarking. The way in which we've been trying to reach the provincial government and get their attention has been using our network through Climate Caucus. Sorry, that's actually the next slide. Let's just take a second to look at the 5, the modeling that we did of the reductions that could be gained by implementing the various parts of Help Cities Lead. Again, black is the 2007 line, yellow is the business as usual, and the lowest, and you can see where the 2 diamonds are, green is the line of indicating the modeling of implementing all elements of the PACE program. And as you can see, it doesn't get us all the way there, but it gets us considerably closer. And it's an ecosystem of policies that work to reinforce each other. If you get a PACE loan and pay it back, then you decide to sell your house, then home energy labeling will allow people to know that it's a good investment, the work is being done. It'll allow you to recoup some of the costs. It's a self-reinforcing ecosystem that if all 5 pieces are put together at the same time, it gives local governments the authority to act coherently and produce big reductions in greenhouse gases. And so what we have been doing, and Jessica has been working with me on this through Climate Caucus, is we've been contacting local governments and asking them to express their support for this. And in about 2.5 months, we've received 30 endorsements so far, which is almost 20% of all the local governments in British Columbia have signed on to it. We're continuing to contact more governments and build up greater support. And in my experience, this is a great way of flagging for the provincial governments that there is great appetite for these kinds of programs. I can see that we're only a few minutes from the end, so I'm just going to probably move to my last slide. Just say thank you for taking the time to listen. And I know we'll have time for a few questions, so I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you so much, Will. Yeah, awesome. And yeah, apologies, we are running a little bit late, and but just such great content. I've learned a whole lot. And one question before we jump in is whether or not you would be willing to share your slides. And so that was a question, and that we would love to be able to share those. That's awesome. Would that be okay too? Okay, great. I'd like to right now invite Pamela and Grouse for any reflections that they have before we get into questions of yours. And my name's Laura Sachs, by the way. Didn't quite introduce myself, but I am on unceded traditional territories here of the Sinixt and the Syilx and the Naha peoples. And yeah, so Pamela and Grouse, thank you. And again, apologies for running a little bit late.
No problem. Thank you for including us in this event this evening. I was pleased to hear that there's some work being done in Indigenous communities. And I would like to see more local First Nations governments involved. It would be awesome to see that area grow. Lim.
I didn't get to hear you guys all, so I'll reserve my comments till later.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll go a little bit late. We'll go to the bottom of the hour, but we do recognize that some of you might need to drop off. So thank you all for joining us if you do need to drop off before. We have a few questions that have been in chat and in the Q&A. And so I'll start with this one, which is actually for anyone who wants to jump in. And it was from Sylvia, and she reflected on this looking at Matthew's National Climate League results, and just noticing that the most expensive cities, Vancouver and Kelowna, for example, are also cities that scored well in green housing, and whether there's a link between step code and cost of housing.
I will defer to my colleagues based in BC. It's getting pretty late here in Montreal, so I'm a little bit less screen appropriate at the moment. So if Betsy or Trish or Will would like to speak to that, we haven't run regressions or of any kind with the pretty shallow data set that exists presently, but I'm sure anecdotally they can speak to that possible correlation.
I'll take a crack at it. I was speaking to my next door neighbor, George, who's a builder, and just asking about that. And he said that probably, you know, going up a level in the step code would probably be, in his view, about $2,000 to $3,000 increase on the average house. But as he said, you know, the reason that housing is really expensive in Canada is not because we're doing too much in the way of GHG reduction. It's, you know, it's a whole raft of other factors, and it is unfortunate that building better does cost a little bit more. But I don't think I think the things that are making housing inaccessible are largely outside of the area of you know, reducing GHGs.
If I could maybe add about building to the step code, there is a slight cost in putting in better windows, for example, but remember the long-term benefits of, if you put in cheap windows, then you don't get the energy savings. So it's a long-term thing. So, and I'm not, the BC Energy Step Code website has a lot of information on affordability and building costs and such, but I would say, or we were finding that it wasn't a huge increase in cost to build into higher steps, or at least to step 3, but certainly the long-term benefits is great.
I would just also add that Energy Step Code is really still relatively new. So those awards, I think, are probably, from some leadership, some other leadership that's been going on for a long time. It's interesting because when you live in a place where land is so highly valued and costs such high values that the houses are actually considered disposable. So it actually makes the retrofit, argument more difficult to make. So I think that, there's sort of different ways of looking at that financial problem.
Yeah, great. And somebody, Sharon put in chat that a contractor friend of hers built a step 4 home for less than $3,000 more than an average home. So, that says a lot, because you're saving an awful lot in heating and cooling costs. So yeah, great. But that's an interesting question, because you might wonder that. So it was a good one to ask. Looking here, we have a lot of different questions. One question that came in with the registration, and I'll open this to anyone as well, is what should we be lobbying our local councils to prioritize to reduce carbon emissions and eliminate the use of fossil fuels? And Trish, I knew you spoke a bit of that when you introduced the big moves. And if you have anything else, anyone has anything else to add to that, that would be great.
Well, we're talking buildings here, so I don't want to get into the transportation piece, but there's an awful lot of active transportation and lobbying, transit and sort of mass transportation. But yeah, I think the 6 big moves that the BC climate leaders have put out are places to start.
Laura, I'd say that with buildings, certainly for new buildings, just as important, sometimes more important than what you build is where you build it. And you can build, just a LEED gold house like 15 kilometers outside of town where you have to get in the car every time you need to get milk. And it turns out to be, a disaster in terms of greenhouse gases. So you can't move buildings that are already there. But I think making sure that future development fills in the footprint of your city, which makes it has a virtuous circle, because that makes transit more sustainable when people live at greater levels of density. But I think the big questions are where we live and how we move around. So if you can and those are things which local governments do have authority over, and we have big levers that we can move to make that work.
Yeah, seeing those interconnections there. It's not just your building, it's your building and how we get around. Yeah, a good point. And, speaking of what we should be pushing our local government, and then there's also higher levels of government. And you spoke to some of that, Will, with the PACE, and Betsy being involved with Pembina. You're probably right there at the forefront of what also needs to be happening at other levels of government. And we did have a question here from Wayne about if we know what has been announced with the forthcoming federal Liberal budget on home-oriented grants. I know there was some announcements happened, but wasn't sure if anybody had an inside scoop on that, or if it's a little too early to know.
Yeah, I don't know of any that have been announced with that. I think it's probably still a bit too fresh.
Yeah, Yeah, we'll be listening with our ear to the ground for that one for sure. So there was another question for you, Betsy. Just curious about the economics and logistics of your heat pump experience.
Yeah, I can talk to that. In fact, if you'll permit me, I'll just quickly share my screen. Heat pumps are more expensive. That's true. And what we really drove us is in that goal to drive down carbon emissions. Actually, I'm just going to skip it because now it's just distracting. But what we've, there are a few ways to look at the rationale with heat pumps. We're definitely paying more in electricity, but part of that is the way that our electricity is billed in BC, and we're hoping to see changes in that too. We'd like to see more time of use billing, like is done in places like Ontario. And by my calculation, because we have such a clean grid, we've cut our carbon emissions. And to a question that somebody had asked about other gases that are problematic, we do consider those other gases. We just call them equivalent carbon dioxide. So don't worry, we are calculating those. Europe hasn't got our number on that. We've actually cut our equivalent carbon dioxide by 90%. Which is an astounding number to me, and that's just switching from natural gas to electric powered heat pumps. And the logistics, somebody was asking if you need like a whole bunch of space underneath the building. We're doing an air-to-air heat pump, so it's taking out that little bit of heat out of the air, the same way that your refrigerator does, takes heat out of the fridge to keep things cool. You may be thinking about ground source heat pumps where you have to put kind of tubes down below and you pull heat up from the underground. So they ran refrigerant lines around my house, and you can box those in and you sort of can integrate those into your house. So I think that maybe answered the question. In places where you air condition, a heat pump actually can do both. So if you're considering an air conditioning replacement, if you can time that with your furnace, actually the costs then start to track out really well.
Great, thank you. I had a question from Robert about district heating projects that are underway. Could anybody speak to that? And in larger cities, maybe things that are underway or that have been completed in larger and smaller cities in Canada?
Jess should probably speak to that, but yeah, we definitely have district heating projects, including in the city of North Van. The False Creek neighborhood utility recovers heat from waste lines, so from black water waste lines, sewage waste. Jess, you could probably speak a little bit to the city of North Vancouver district heating, but yes, there's lots of district heating going on.
Yeah, I can quickly mention there are different district energy and district heating programs or systems in BC and in Canada. The one that's in the city of North Vancouver is it's a pretty significant system that has about 85 buildings now connected to it, that has currently has natural gas boilers that are used. So it does have a greenhouse gas footprint, obviously. There is a plan to decarbonize the system, but basically it was put in because there's sort of two benefits if you look at it, that all of those buildings, if they had their own natural gas boilers and systems within the building, they would have a much higher footprint than the total system does now. But also the retrofit ability is, it's going to be much easier for us to decarbonize that system as a whole, and different things that we have planned, including connecting to an upcoming wastewater treatment plant where we're getting the waste heat from a new wastewater treatment plant, and other things that are being done. But that decarbonization process is going to be much easier than if we had to decarbonize and retrofit all of those buildings individually. But happy to answer any questions on that system anytime.
Wonderful. There's lots of great questions coming in here, so I'm trying to figure out which ones to ask here, but we do have a question about education and whether or not, oh, now I've lost it. Where is it? I know that I just saw it here. Whether or not this type of information is getting into the schools and into the curriculum at all. Could anybody speak to that, or is that just beyond your scope here? If there's modules available, here we go, to introduce this information to children as part of new BC curriculum.
I'm aware that Fortis BC was piloting a high school program and an elementary school program at one point on energy efficiency. I don't know any more than that.
BC Sustainable Energy Association has a program, but I'm not sure if it includes that type of stuff or not either. So yeah.
They just expanded actually to do a high school program, which is pretty cool. And they actually deliver those through working with the schools. And so they're in municipalities actually all over BC. So yeah, BC Sustainable Energy is a really great resource for that.
Thank you, Betsy.
I'll put in a plug for the Northern, see if I can remember the acronym, but the Northern Communities Youth Summit. And there's a group of high school students. It'll be a virtual conference, but it's in May. And they'll be working on community energy plans for their schools. So that's happening in May. I'll figure out how to put a link in the chat.
That would be great. There's a question here about whether or not BC contractors and the renovation industries have the building science expertise they need for retrofits and energy efficient new buildings, or is more training needed? Yes, nods Betsy.
Lots of training is needed. I mean, the interesting experience though, we have somebody who is a lead builder, and he kind of goes around and helps builders train up. And he says that when he works with them, he shows them the little bits of changes that he can, that can shift you from step 3 to step 4. And a lot of them go, oh, well, that's not that bad. And so it's actually, it's not as scary as it seems. And it sounds like, there's sort of a way to teach an old dog new tricks in this case. And energy step code, that is what I would say has really, been the fallout from that, is this sort of upskilling. And that's actually within the municipalities as well. Their building departments actually have to keep up with this too. So there's an improvement there too.
Well, I think we're going to have to be wrapping it up here. I know there's a lot more great questions, and maybe we'll compile these and share them with you so that you can, if you're not catching them all on the Q&A as they're coming through. So before we leave, because of the National Climate League link, I'm really curious. Maybe each of you can just suggest one or two things. What can we be measuring to better track what's going on with our buildings? Like, are we, is it what policies are in place, or is it numbers of buildings? Yeah, really curious what your ideas are that we can track here in British Columbia. We do track the BC step code for municipalities. That's one thing that we are tracking. Any ideas would be great. So we can just go around, whoever wants to unmute and make a suggestion. And if you don't have any, no problem.
I'll jump in. I love getting on my utilities tracking and going, okay, how much energy have I used? And then comparing it to last year is super interesting to me. But you could just get communities together, your fellow homeowners or neighbors, and kind of go, let's compare our houses and let's start talking about this. I mean, some of what our problem is that we're not measuring that stuff. And so we don't need to make this a government problem. We could get together and kind of go, well, what's normal? Are our houses performing well? I don't know. And, you can actually start asking the questions yourself if you want to come at it from a tracking. You have the data.
Great point. Thanks.
Well, I think then on that note, the Nelson ecosave program has the heat mapping, and you can go right online and look at your house and see what color it is. And that's sort of speaking to Betsy's point. Oh, gee, why is my house orange and my neighbor's green? It's sort of it. I think that's an incentive to look at your own home.
That's really awesome. Great data. If your city is one of the ones that has that tracking, that's really insightful, right? You can just see it. Thanks. And Will, as closing, if you've got any ideas or insights.
I think those are both great suggestions, but I guess maybe it'll be difficult to do it on a macro level. I think Betsy's slide about the sheer volume of houses and square footage that needs to be done per year. It'd be great to just see, sort of a bar graph of how much actually is getting done each year, so we can see whether we're getting anywhere close to the kind of speed and scale of work that needs to be done province-wide. That would be really useful and probably a bit, anyway, yeah. It's not, those numbers won't be where they need, but at least it'll show us how far we've got to go.
Yeah, very sobering, the scale and the speed. And let's hope that it feels like we're going slow until we're going fast. So to close, I just wanted to thank our guests. So Will, Betsy, Trish, thanks so much for your time and your expertise and all of the exciting new ideas that we have going around in our heads right now. And also Pamela and Grouse, thank you so much for your opening and your words of wisdom there, and really grounding us in what is important. And yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, lastly, thank you all of you that are still on here on the webinar, even though we went over a few minutes. And really thanks for being curious and asking questions, and just all of the energy that I'm feeling from you, even though we can't be in the same room. And we'll be sharing the recording with you, as well as any resources that were mentioned, and the slides as well, hopefully. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of your evening, everyone.
Buonanotte.
Good night.
Hi, thank you.